Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Michelle here from happyhealthyher.com. And in this week's compassionate chat, we are again continuing our theme of talking about societal norms that are actually prone to cause us to be manipulated. We've talked before about compromise, and we've talked about the idea of people being replaceable. I will link to those videos below. But today we are getting into the topic of people doing their best. Chances are you have heard that everybody is doing the best they can. But that's not true. If you are like me and you've encountered the roughly 15 to 20% of the population that are considered to be manipulators or narcissists or sociopaths or psychopaths, you know very well that not everybody has positive thoughts and agendas. Not everybody is looking to do good and be good. There are a decent number of people who are actually out there with their own agenda, their own egos, their own goals, and they're not considering anyone else, and they are certainly not doing their best when they show up in the world. So it's very important for those of us who are kind of the overachievers, the do-gooders, the ones who are trying to do our best, to recognize the presence and the prevalence of these types of people. Because if we don't see them clearly, then we are prone to be manipulated by them. So I wanted to go into 4 different scenarios that I've had over the course of my life that I think will be relatable to other people, because they're fairly common and they are actually fairly easy to see when you step back and really take a clear perspective around the reality that not everybody has positive intentions. So the first scenario, I'm going to take you all the way back to elementary school. So when I was as early as 5, I was already an overachiever. I was already really driven to do my best and get along with everyone. I just remember being in kindergarten and just having so much pressure in my own head that I needed to do good and be good. And that was sort of the start of my teacher's pet era, where I was always straight A student. I was always, top of the class because I tried really hard. I don't mind saying I was a nerd girl, a try-hard, a do-gooder. I've been all of those things, and I'm happy to be those things. But being those things has meant that I'm often manipulated. I'm often sort of on the fringe because not everybody else is behaving in that way. So just like my experience as a 5-year-old is I take my first aptitude test, and I am an INFJ personality type. And I remember, that first aptitude test was a lot of patterns, it was shapes, and it was puzzles. And I remember thinking it was so much fun, and it was intriguing, and I knew I was doing well because it was very easy. And I looked around the room, and the other kids, many were having meltdowns. They didn't know what they were supposed to be doing, or they were upset because they weren't able to answer the questions. And so I thought, that felt really odd to me. And come to find out, we get the test back, and I had tested as a genius. I'm not sharing this to brag. I'm just explaining where my track ended up. So you end up with high scores. I know anybody who has been a classic overachiever has the same experience. And then you get fast-tracked in the advanced group. And my friends and I have talked about this, how being in the advanced group was not what it was cracked up to be. We often had extra work, extra book reports, and it felt like we were being punished. Like we're children and we just want to play just like other kids, but we're given boatloads of work. And that was literally my existence all through school. But what I noticed was some of the other kids who had extreme aptitude, we're not taking the same track. So there's one boy, and I will refer to him as Jack, just because I don't think anyone in my school is named Jack. But this particular boy was way smarter than me. He had such natural aptitude for math and science, and I remember we would get into breakout groups and he would finish his problems so fast. And he'd just be like, you guys are losers. And he didn't want to be part of the advanced group. He thought we were all nerds, and he was not shy about telling us that. He was a bit of a bully. But he had, like I said, totally natural aptitude. He barely even had to try. And I've seen this with people in the work world too. There are people who have just a natural ability. So Jack ends up sort of just saying, I don't care to be, the smart kid. I don't care to do anything. And he stopped doing his work. He would skip school. And as we got older, he just kind of disappeared. And what I had heard through the grapevine was that he was in juvie hall, and that he had been he had gotten into drugs, or he had done something. But I never heard from him or about him again. But the point of Jack is that here's someone who had so much ability, so much natural potential, but he didn't want to do it. He was not doing his best. In fact, it was almost like he's actively trying to do the least. And this is, again, not that uncommon. There are people who take that track, who just decide that they're going to slide in, take the easy road in life, and not do the work and not try hard. And it's kind of silly of us to assume that they're actually trying their best when it's generally very clear that they're not trying their best, and they're just phoning it in, basically. So another situation I had was with someone who was actually significantly older than myself. They were probably 40 or 50 years older than I was. But I was in a connection with this person for many years, and so I would observe their behavior. And I was constantly telling myself that they must not know any better. They must not know that they're coming across so cruel. They must not know that they seem really manipulative or hurtful. And so I would keep giving them pass after pass in my head. And then one day I happened to observe them in really close proximity, and it became very, very clear who this person was and how they were actually behaving. So I'm going to call them Barbara. So Barbara had committed to her friend Lisa that she was going to help set up for a party, and somehow I got pulled into that as well. So I was going to help as well. I had committed as well. Told Lisa, I'll show up early, I'll help you set up for the party. So I go to Barbara's house, and she's not ready. And she's shuffling around the house, drinking her coffee, reading the paper, doing little things. And I'm like, Barbara, we have to go in like 5 minutes. What are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just busy. She can wait. Lisa can wait. And she just sort of was dragging her feet. And I was getting so anxious because I was like, I don't like to be late. I don't like to let someone down. So the party was actually only like a few minutes walk away. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go and start helping set up, and you get there when you need to get there. So I go and get there, and there really didn't need to have that much help, but I put out a couple of chairs or whatever, put some dip out, and helped. I did what I said I was supposed to do, so I felt better. And then, lo and behold, like 15 minutes later, Barbara comes sauntering in and has this sort of dramatic, flustered, oh my gosh, I was so busy. Oh, today, yeah, I'm late because I had a lot to do. I don't think she apologized. She just was like making it all about her, like I wasn't able to get here. I had so much to do, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there watching like, I happen to know for a fact that you didn't have a lot to do and that you were doing it on purpose. And so it was brutal to actually see that kind of behavior, but I share it because I'm sure you have seen it too in people you know. When you see it, believe it. So the next two scenarios are work related. And so work is often a challenge for many of us because people show up at work and oftentimes they aren't doing their best. And I think the intention a lot of times is like they're sticking it to the man, or like, I'm not going to work for the corporate. I'm going to just do whatever I feel like doing. But the problem with that mentality is you're never actually sticking it to the manager or the higher up. You are usually sticking it to all your coworkers who have to pick up your slack or have to deal with your negative energy. It's a really crappy thing to do that, to show up with that way. And so I had someone in particular that I actually really liked this person, but working with them was so challenging because they intentionally caused a lot of drama. They intentionally created chaos and difficulties, especially with our manager. So in one particular scenario, my desk was really close to this person, and they had their email on audio alert. So like you'd get a ding every time an email would come in, which was kind of annoying, but I didn't really care, whatever. But her email dings, and I notice I'm getting an email at the same time. We are often on the same text or email threads, of course, because we're on the same team. So our manager had emailed us with a request with some urgency that said, I need to know, can we change the meeting for tomorrow to a different time? I'm going to reschedule the conference room or whatever. So I immediately respond and was like, no problem. And then I watch as my coworker clearly reads the email and then gets up from their desk and starts straightening things out and goes and gets a snack. And I think she even went to the bathroom, and like 15 minutes later goes by and our manager comes into our office and is like, did you get my email? And I'm just sitting there cringing, like, and so my colleague says, yeah, I was going to get to it. I didn't have time or whatever. And, you know, they go back and forth, and this was very common. And if you are someone who's sensitive, an empath, you know it's really hard to work in an environment with people who are fighting. Like, I hate confrontation. It was very hard to sort of be in that energy, knowing that they were kind of always going at each other. And so it gets resolved, but I just remember shaking my head and thinking, why can't you just be agreeable? Why can't you just get along? Why are you trying to be so difficult? So we then end up going as a team to a professional development talk, which was so interesting. As the nerd girl that I am, I absolutely love professional development. I love motivational speakers. I love positive, words of advice. I go and I'm just soaking it all up. So we have this really great speaker, and he is super optimistic. And one of the first things he says is that everyone is doing the best we can. And then he adds, if they knew better, don't you think they would do better? And I remember scribbling that down in my notes and thinking, yeah, if they knew better, they would do better. And for whatever reason, my head's back in that mindset of, yeah, stop thinking, negative. Stop being so critical. Give people a pass. Again. So I get back at work and I'm dealing with another employee who is actually a new graduate. And this person was quite entitled. They thought they should be making more money. They thought that they should have, better title, that kind of thing, and was very vocal about that. And we had interviewed quite a few people for this job, and we were very clear, like, this is part-time, this is sort of an interim thing. And, most of the people were like dying to get the job. So this person told us everything we wanted to hear about how she was going to be this fantastic employee. So we give her the job, and one of the things we needed her to do was to actually take some documents that had been in an electronic form and put them into a print form, because what we had found is that something had gone awry and our print versions were not matching our electronic versions. And so I put together a really simple but also detailed protocol of exactly how to do what we were asking this person to do. And it involved like copying and pasting and reformatting into templates. And I had tested it several times and other people had done it and everything had been working smoothly. Well, this person starts doing it, and before I know it, it's about a couple of days are gone by and I'm not really micromanaging. I don't do that. And I get word from someone that, hey, so we found out that those print documents are still not matching. We're still having errors. And I was like, how can that be? Like, that doesn't even make sense. So I call the new employee into a meeting and I ask them to explain what they're doing, that like maybe where the thing could have gotten broken. So basically they just look at me and they said, well, the policy you gave me was stupid and I didn't want to follow it because it was really tedious and it didn't work and the formatting was off, and so I just retyped them. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's the exact thing we did not want you to do, because that's where the errors come in. And so she had spent, several days, hours of our time, our budget, doing the wrong thing because she didn't think that she needed to follow the protocol. So I think, okay, simple mistake. I'm like, all right, well, I took her off that project and I gave her a different project, but I was very clear, like, I do need to review what you're doing because we are under very strict regulations and we can't post certain things. And so I need to know what you're going to do before you do it. Well, they went ahead and did it without getting any approval. So 2 strikes. And I'm a very passive person. I wasn't like rude. I wasn't aggressive. I just was like, you're not going to be able to work on my projects anymore because this is just, I need you to have a level of detail and I need you to be accountable. And so, end of story. But, back to the whole point of, if everyone is doing their best, surely everyone's trying, everyone knows. Well, this person again is proving she knew better and she chose not to do better. And it's just like so many times you get this pointed out to you, you have to believe it. So the interesting thing is that when we look back at where does this myth even come from in terms of everybody doing the best they can? Now, I think in a lot of ways, it's just an optimistic perspective that makes us all feel better. It feels better to believe that, but it's actually harmful because believing it puts you in the wrong headspace and it doesn't make you critical and really aware of what's happening around you. On top of that, it's kind of interesting. Maya Angelou is often credited with that advice. But it's really because she's been misquoted. Her quote was, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. So in her advice, she's actually not saying everybody's doing their best. She's actually making it a lot more humanistic and saying, frequently people have that option to do their best, but then it takes them knowing better to actually make that choice. So it's interesting. I think that that's helpful to get back to that type of clarity. I actually wrote a blog about that. I will link to that below if that's something you're interested in. So the thing that's especially interesting about this topic to me is that the better piece of advice that also came from Dr. Angelou is that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So this is much healthier. And this is what we all need to be doing. We need to be trusting our instincts. We need to see when someone's behavior is showing something very clearly, that we don't dismiss it, that we don't assume that they don't know better, that we don't think, I just have to try harder, I just have to be more compassionate. No, in some instances, you just have to take the information at face value. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please go ahead and like and subscribe and share with friends. Either way, as always, I wish you happiness and good health. And thanks for being with me.